Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be my top 15 eyeshadow palettes for spring. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. Today we're doing video number 2 in eyeshadow palette week. We're talking spring palettes. I hadn't really done a video yet telling you about my favorite eyeshadow palettes for spring, and I think this is the third year I'm filming this video. I tried to make sure there are no doubles from previous years, so I'll make sure to link those two videos down below, so that if you want to hear my thoughts on some other spring palettes, then that's definitely possible. I definitely tried to check with last year's videos that there would be no overlap. So yeah, I have 15 selected here today, plus one honorable mention, so let's just get to it. But before we do that, I have to point out that I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, which greatly skews my makeup preferences. And because I have been buying, trying, and reviewing makeup for more than a decade, I also have some very strong opinions. And if you're into eyeshadow palettes, Essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of your makeup, then you may just be interested in subscribing to the channel and joining the Snow Angel family by clicking the subscribe button down below. So yes, 15 palettes plus an honorable mention. And the honorable mention is an honorable mention because you cannot buy this. This is a sneak peek of something that's to come later in the week, because I sat down to film my eyeshadow palette reorganization video before I started filming these videos. And I was like, what's like a really good like color story for spring? And I was like, I love a good like lavender lilac. And what did I put together when I filmed my eyeshadow palette reorganization is a purpley lilac color story with all of the cool tones from some of my ABH palettes. So these are all shades that are from original ABH palettes, some of them discontinued. Some of these are purples from the Jackie Aina, for instance. This is a purple from the Riviera. I don't even know where this one is from anymore. This I know is from the Norvina. Those are in here. There are a couple of shades in here from like the Sultry, like some more Riviera. Like there's a couple of really good shades in here, and this color story, I have no words. So if you want to see me put this together and like select the shades and pull it all out and making a mess of my makeup room, because that's definitely what happened that day, then definitely have a look at that video. It should be up on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. So where do we start? Let's start with one of the bigger things, and something that's also quite new to me. So a lot of the palettes I will be featuring here are things that I bought in like the past year and a half or so. The Serenity palette from Cosmic Brushes, I think, is perfect for spring. Let me tell you why. First of all, it's my favorite color story, blues, greens, and purples. So what's not to love? But the reason why this is a really good palette for spring is because it does go really light. Some blue, green, purple palettes can be pretty grungy feeling. I definitely feel that some of the recent releases from like Shroud and also from Fantasy Cosmetica have been very sort of like grungy blue, green, purple palettes, but this has the brightness that I feel pulls it into spring for me. So like these two shades, this one, it also has this like really interesting like purple with a blue flash in the shimmers, and it does have the depth that you can like anchor the look and not have it be too flat if it were to be an all pastel palette. But this definitely has some brightness, and also this like orangey neon sort of shade is more of a light orange transition on me, which works really well as well. So that's why I thought this could be a perfect palette for spring. A palette I haven't even tried yet, but I was like, if I do want to go for grunge in the spring season, I thought this could be perfect. So this was sent to me. One of my subscribers had a double one of the Gemini 2 from Melt and was like, would you like to have it? And I was like, sure. Now this is one I didn't pay for with my own money, mainly because it has a lot of warm tones going on here. But I think that pinky peach is really stunning for the spring season, and especially these like murky greens. It's like if you see everything in bloom again in a couple of weeks, these like greens are like the grass and like the stems of the flowers. It's like a rose garden in a palette. That's probably why they've made the packaging this way, but that's why I was like, this is stunning for the spring season, and I don't just want to come on here recommending things that I think are perfect for myself, but especially if you have a deeper skin tone, this may be good for you, or if you have a very warm olivey undertone, then I think Melt is definitely a good brand to look into. And I think this color story may be perfect for a lot of people who aren't as pale as me. Fairy Frolic from Alien Cosmetics, now called Unearthly, of course. Mine still says Alien because that's when I bought it. This now looks very different as well. It's got completely different packaging, but this was one of my first purchases from the brand. And I just like, I almost put in the strawberry milkshake, but then I realized that I put that in last year for that pop of something bright. But this is like, again, it's like a blooming garden in a color story. I mean, you get the greens from like the stems and the leaves, and then you just have like the earthy tones in here as well. But then you also get some like pops of color. I don't know why, but for me, this definitely, like, it can also be pulling like more grungy and fall leaning if you put some of the warm tones together. But I definitely think because of those like plummy shades it has, it can definitely be more of a spring palette as well. It's got a bit of brightness, but it just really nicely toes that middle ground, I feel, which is why I feel it's perfect for spring. Did you think that was all the blue, green, purple I was gonna give you? Of course not. This guy, the Aether Beauty Moonlight Crystal Palette. And this, I'm not sure you can still get it. I got it at a great discount for 40% off from their website in a sale last year. And I think, again, it's a bit brighter. You can make it grungy if you pull in these shades, but if you stick to the lighter shades in the palette, and especially here, you get these really pretty ethereal looking shimmers. This is a good one. And again, this kind of color story for the spring season is my comfort zone. But then I asked myself the question, like, really, what are these shades that I just love in the spring season? And it's periwinkle. And we got a couple of really good periwinkle related releases in the past year. Case in point, the Kaleidos Glowing Iris eyeshadow palette. This is what it looks like. It's, again, if you leave out the darker shade, and the shimmer is perhaps a bit too deep, but especially those two mattes, like, that's spring in a palette to me. Like, these really soft periwinkle lilacs, that's where it's at. I think, like, for spring, it's like greens and like periwinkle soft lavender purples. That's sort of what I've got in my head as being like perfect shades for spring for me, and this palette definitely delivers. And I'm not sure whether I've ever shown this palette. You can no longer buy it. It's sadly been discontinued, but I looked at this and I was like, to me, this is a spring palette, and it's the Solamona from Odin's Eye. I don't think I featured this as a spring palette on my channel before, but why do I think it's spring? Well, it's got that. First of all, I was just telling you how I like a lavender lilac pastel purple in the spring season. So this, just for that shade. But it's also got these like mustardy yellows, which to me represents like sunshine. And then we have this really interesting shimmer that is like that gold with the green flip. We get some like cooler tones in here as well. Especially this shade I just love, and it goes really well with that like lavender shade. And that's one of the things I've really liked about this palette is you get those warm tones that just remind me of like the warmth of the season and the earth sort of like warming up, but then you get those like pops of something brightness. It's like, you know, the promise of spring. There's new life. And I feel that this palette represents that really well. Speaking of cool tone purples, the Fenty Beauty Cool Neutrals number 2 from the Snap Shadows, which nobody seems to like apart from me. Now, this of course, like the grays perhaps make it look a little sad, but this is not a sad palette. If you look at those like dusty pinks and that pop of purple, like this, I think perfect for spring. That purple adds a bit of brightness. You do have to build it up quite a bit, so I prefer using this on the lower lash line for a pop of something bright, and it just works really, really well for that, I think. So this is a really nice, like more neutral leaning color story, but you do get that pop of like the pink with the purple to really make it perfect for spring, and that's why I think these like softer, sort of almost grayish mauve tone leaning pinky purples can be really, really stunning for the spring season as well. But also in the, it could be grunge, but it could be spring as well vein, the Glaminatrix Nocturnal palette. I think it's been discontinued. I'm not entirely sure. I believe this was like the last round that they did it when I got it. I'm not entirely sure anymore. But this has grungy shades, but especially in the mattes, it's got a lot of brightness. That peach and that green shimmer are really fun. These two teals are really fun for the spring season. And then again, you get this earthy tone that I feel can really sort of anchor the palette and make it a bit more like vibrant for spring, but earthy at the same time, and I feel that that really goes with this color story. I'm not sure if you're catching my drift, but that's how I feel about this one. I think because of those brighter pops, it really pulls it into spring for me. Something else that's itty bitty, but that I think is also going to be appealing to a lot of people who love their warm tones. I think this is again a great palette for the spring season. It's the Mini Zendo from Natasha Denona. And this thing, I mean, I wasn't originally going to get this, and then I swatched it in store, and this shade in the middle just stole my heart. It's like a gray, but then it has like a green running through it. It's not a full-on green. It looks very green compared to these shades for sure, but it's not super green. I do really like that transition shade. I love this like plummy brown we get, and then you get the warmth in these peach leaning rose tones. It's almost like this shade, especially like the shimmer, is like NARS Orgasm, but intensify it to be an eyeshadow kind of vibes, if you know what I mean. And this I think is just really stunning for spring. Again, we get a little bit of the hint of something green. It's like the more muted down version of the Melt palette. Almost. Like the Melt Gemini 2. Again, it's like a rose garden, but like peachy roses rather than pinky tone roses, in a very miniature eyeshadow palette. So I do really enjoy this one. Great quality as well from Natasha Denona. And I was very surprised at how well this worked for my pale skin, but I think you're gonna love this if you have medium skin with a warm undertone. More warmth, because we are heading into the spring summer season, and I don't always love warm tones on myself. I can get away with them, but especially if I get a little bit more color in my face. So I'm like, it's the start of April as I'm filming this, and it's very much a, you know, we're still sort of winter pale skin, so I need to soak up some sun first before things like this will look good on me. And it's the Tartelette Juicy by Tarte. This, I mean, those pinky shades, like the warm tones with the pinks, I think that's like the other part of spring that I like. When you get the warm tones with the rosy tones, like a warm rose, I think is very spring-like. And I think this is a stunning one for that. I have said how I don't really love that middle row because it's just a bit too warm tone for me, but the pinks and the cooler tones at the bottom is where this palette lives, and I feel this palette bridges the gap for me between the Tartelette Toasted and the Tartelette In Bloom, the In Bloom being one of my favorite all-time neutral palettes. I mean, I could have slapped that one in here for sure, but this is a stunning eyeshadow palette that I think will appeal to all of my warm tone sisters. Remember what I said about loving greens? This guy, the Dancing in the Sky from Gloss Gots. I hope they bring it back soon. I'm sure it's in stock at the minute. Gloss Gots is another EU-based indie brand that I really, really enjoy. I have discovered them in the past 6 months or so, and I only just recently reviewed this, and this is a stunning green palette. It is all shimmer, though. So I do recommend using this with a couple of mattes if you are a bit unsure about it, but I did a couple of full-on shimmer looks with this, and I was down with it. I was down with it. This is a stunning palette. It just, the sparkles in this, it makes me happy. It brings me joy. It's called Dancing in the Sky. I think this is a perfect palette for the springtime. It just makes me happy. You know what also makes me happy? This guy. This is not a standalone palette for me as well, but it's another great EU-based indie brand that's just a bit more accessible if you're on my side of the planet. It's by Glam Shop. It's their Very Perry, and this is just, I mean, it's periwinkle heaven. Now, I did feel when I tried this out that this is a bit too blue heavy compared to these, which are more purple leaning. So they don't really go together. And there aren't that many like deepening up shades or anything like this. So in terms of like this being a full rounded palette for me, not necessarily. We get some really stunning shades in here. I love the 5 shimmers. They're stunning. But in terms of like a color story, again, like the Dancing in the Sky, looking at this just brings me joy. Like this makes me happy and excited to be wearing lighter colors again and to really go out in the world and have a good time. And that's what this palette represents for me. So periwinkle blue just makes me happy, puts a smile on my face, and this is a good one. More Natasha Denona. I said it when this launched. I think this is a spring palette. It just is. I've put the very sort of similar Venus XL2 in this palette video in the past. I did compare the palettes to see how similar they are, and I feel they are different enough for me, but if you own one, you don't necessarily need the other one as well. So if that's a question you had. But yeah, the Retro Glam from Natasha Denona. I mean, if we're talking like a rose garden, but then make it cool toned, that's this. Like, I just pulled these out of my collection willy-nilly, going like, what haven't I chatted about yet? And what do I feel represents spring? And I end up choosing like 3 or 4 palettes that all have greens, neutrals, and rosy pinks. It's a theme. It's a theme. So yeah, this is definitely one where I'm like, yes, but this is a bit more sagey green leaning, which I like. I especially like these shades over here and like this corner over here, and then you get those pinks sprinkled in. I love this palette. Remember what I said about liking lighter purples? My final 2 options both have that in. First up, Nouveau from ABH. So this is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette, in case you didn't get the full name. This again, it's like the updated version of the Solomona almost for me. It doesn't have as much warmth as the Solomona has because it has those mustard yellows, and this is more peach leaning. So you get some peachy shades here and some peachy shades here, but it also has some cool tones. It's got this stunning lighter purple, which I don't think a lot of people actually liked, but I like this palette, and I really like some of the greens we get in here as well. It's just that pop of purple makes the palette for me, and I think it's a perfect palette for spring. And finally, last but not least, a palette I cannot stop raving about. The 5 in a Box from Catrice in the Diamond Lavender look. So if the Fenty Beauty is too expensive for you, or you want it to be more cool toned, try this. Yes, it's incredibly light. It does pull very light. So perhaps if you have deep skin, this may look very gray and ashy on you. You would have to put it over a white base, I'm sure. Also, if you have a warm undertone, this is going to look very, very blown out on you. On me, perfection. Perfection. When I reviewed it, I wanted to make sure that I could show you how versatile this little 5 pan actually is. I think I did 5 different looks with it, and I still wasn't done coming up with different combinations. That just tells you how versatile this is. It doesn't go overly deep. We get like a purpley undertone in all of these shades, which I like. But especially that very light purple in the middle is where it's at for me. It does need a lot of building up. It's a bit like the Fenty Beauty shade in that sense, where you do need to build it up. So this is best if you apply it with a finger, or maybe with like a more dense brush. That's when it works best. This is of course very gray heavy, which may not be to everyone's taste, but I really like mine. So those were the 15 palettes I wanted to share with you, as I think, the ones that I think I have that are perfect for the springtime. Let me know in a comment down below what your picks would be. And of course, I have a lot more content coming your way. I'm coming to you daily throughout eyeshadow palette week. So stay tuned for all of that goodness. Like I said, that eyeshadow palette reorganization video is coming up soon. And then of course I have other things coming as well. So if you'd like to come back for more, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye.